Books have always been one of the most important parts of my life. Books have been a constant throughout so many different things. I've lived so many different lives in the short life that I've led. Books have consistently been a common denominator. I don't think I'd be the person that I am today if I didn't have access to reading, and reading wasn't a priority for me. So I want to take you through my life through books. These are books that absolutely stood out to me. They might not be my favorite books, they might not even be that great of books, but these are books that I can pinpoint to an exact place, state of mind, version of myself. And I'm so happy that I'm able to use books as a venue to kind of explore those parts of who I was. So buckle up, sit down, get your favorite beverage, let's hang out. This is going to be kind of a personal video. I'm going to reveal kind of things about myself, and I'm going to do it through the medium of books. But before we get into it, let's talk about today's sponsor, beautiful, beautiful Skillshare.
What makes Skillshare so unique? It is the largest online learning community for creatives with a wide depth and breadth of topics ranging from illustration, graphic design, photography, creative writing, animation, fine art, music production, film and video, marketing, productivity, freelance, and entrepreneurship, among a slew of other things. And whether you want to learn the basics of watercolor or painting, or learn how to start your own creative business, Skillshare has classes to take you from beginner to pro alongside a supportive community. It is a world-class community that connects teachers and members to inspiration and feedback from like-minded creatives. It has a learn-by-doing approach, teaching where each member can create and share a project after completing a class. An on-demand platform with stackable lessons, so members can learn at their own pace, no matter the skill level, and you know that's important.
They're a fantastic company that promotes kind of growth within yourself, promotes learning new things, promotes the idea of trying something new. Maybe you've known, but I've been working on my editing through Skillshare. I've been working on my cell phone photography, which has been nice to see that there's more options than just point and kind of click. And this month, I have been working on my auditioning technique. What I've actually been really, really loving this time around is that they have an app. I actually didn't even realize that. I've just been doing it all on my computer. And as you know, I've been trying to spend less time on my phone. Or if you don't know, hello, I've been trying to spend less time on my phone. But this, I feel, is a very good investment of my time if I am going to be on my phone, just clicking on that app instead of going on other apps that would kind of feel like I'm wasting my time. I feel like Skillshare, having it on my phone, has been beneficial. I love me some Skillshare. And this month, the team at Skillshare is offering an amazing, amazing deal. The first 500 people to sign up using the link in my bio will get their first month free. You can try it out, see if it's for you, download it on your phone, see if you like the app, and you can just go from there, learn something new. Or you can brush up on something that you already are well aware of, but just want to make sure that it still works. I love it. Give it a check out. See how you feel. Let's get back to my story. Okay, so let's get a little dramatic. No, I'm kidding. Okay, so if we're going to talk about my life in books, we have to start from the very, very beginning. Well, not the inception of my life. The books that I started to read independently, and that would probably put me out, what, like 8, maybe 9, 10, 12, around that area. These are books that I think I was assigned a couple in school, but I definitely started picking up books on my own and kind of forging what my opinions were about books and what I liked and disliked. The first book, and I've talked about this quite a few times on the channel, so I'm not going to really talk about it too much, but it was the book Stargirl. I remember that book absolutely just tearing me apart. And I remember sitting at my kitchen table with my feet up on the table like this, just reading the book. I couldn't get enough of it. I mean, granted, I had been reading a lot of books. I've been reading Shel Silverstein. My mom had always read to me, and I was very fortunate to always have the presence of novels around me, and they were very accessible. Aside from that book, there were 2 other books that I remember absolutely moving me to tears and making me feel something I couldn't get in a movie. I couldn't get in a TV show. I just couldn't get the same sort of impassioned feelings like I got from these two novels. And those two novels were Small Steps and The Watsons Go to Birmingham. These two novels, it's gonna make me cry thinking about them now. I don't know what it was, but these novels absolutely moved me. It made me understand just how you could tell these truly unbelievable moments and get them across in just these very basic words that even a child can comprehend. Yeah, I remember sitting in my bed sobbing, reading both of these books. It was probably like 5 p.m. But as a kid, I was like, I'm up so late reading for so long. These books did it for me. Those were novels that really shaped my youth. And I mean, I also really got into The Perks of Being a Wallflower. I remember I read The Lovely Bones. Those were books that were kind of in that younger era of time, but they didn't really, I don't know, these were books that, oh man, got me so good as a kid and really kind of helped to broaden this love for reading. Okay. After that, I am probably around, let's say 14, 15. I'm in the midst of just starting in high school, right? Fully love reading at this point. I would say it's probably a defining characteristic. At this point, I was definitely starting to have a much more mature taste. You're starting to get a lot of these classics suggested to you in American high schools. American classics. You had The Catcher in the Rye, you had The Great Gatsby. All of these books that definitely shaped my opinions as a reader as well. I was definitely getting into Sophie's Choice, Memoirs of a Geisha, The Thornbirds. All of these books that were kind of epic and massive undertakings for a young person, but I loved them nonetheless. The book that is always defined that age for me, and this isn't necessarily like a classic, this isn't necessarily a hugely heralded novel, White Oleander by Janet Fitch. Man, oh God, this got me so good as a young girl. This is a bop for the girlies. This, if you're unfamiliar with what it's about, it follows this young girl. Her mother has been accused of killing her lover, and it follows the young girl's trajectory through foster home, through foster home, through foster home, through foster home, and ultimately kind of who she becomes after all of this whirlwind. Every time I see that very distinct cover of the girl, kind of, the back of her, I get this chill down my back, and it makes me think of just who I was at that age. Kind of eerie because the main character is also blossoming into, 14, 15, 16 years old, which is probably around the age that I was when I read it. And so I think I saw a lot of parallels between the confusion of who we are at those ages and kind of what we're expected to be. It just, to this day, I see that and it's just like, God, I know where I was. I was on a futon in my bedroom, getting such a strong kink in my neck. But I couldn't move. I couldn't be moved. It really stationed itself in my heart. I still have my copy, and I want to reread it just because I want to see if it still brings me anything like it did. Then we're starting to truck on to when I was about, how old was I at this point? I had probably graduated high school. I was working a lot. I didn't go to school. It just wasn't for me. So I absolutely invested so much of my time reading and kind of educating myself. And this was at the time in my life where I got into a lot of experimental fiction. I was reading a little bit more kind of coarse novels, trying to sink my teeth into the underbelly of the literary world. Burroughs, I was reading Junkie, Bukowski, Polinick, even though he had kind of always filtered into my younger reading as well. Bret Easton Ellis, also getting into Joan Didion too. I remember I was reading them and I was enjoying them, but I was still kind of in this fantasy of being a completionist, if that makes sense. A lot of what I was reading books for was the idea of reading them and finishing them and saying that I had read them. But there was a particular book that made me understand what it meant to read and love and experience a novel. And that is One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest by Ken Kesey. I've talked about this before, but this was a book that absolutely defined a time in my life as a reader. It made me shift my perspective of what it meant to understand a book. I remember every single time I opened up this book. I loved this book. It was everything I needed in a book, and it made me focus much more on what I would get out of a book, kind of conversations that could be had after finishing a book. Not that the other books that I was reading before didn't have those qualities. They definitely did. I just wasn't experiencing books that way. I wasn't taking books and utilizing them to their best ability. This was the book that kind of matured me. Again, I remember exactly where I was. I was in my bed, you know, my ass was sore because I'd been sitting for so long, and I remember I was just reading it like this, trying to hover, doing some like yoga poses before I even knew what that was. It got me so good. I loved it. Where are we after? I've kind of understood who I am as a reader, who I want to be, what I want to get out of novels. And this is when I started to really get into, I think, more memoir, kind of looking into people's actual lives, trying to understand how we can kind of perceive someone in real life, and then you can use their actual words to get a deeper understanding of who they are. I remember I was reading Autobiography of a Face by Lucy Greeley, I think is her name. But the most profound memoir for me, and a book that really would ultimately deviate the direction of my life, was Just Kids by Patti Smith. I think that this was a novel kind of universally loved by a lot of people. I think it also just blew open the doors of this art scene, and taking the artist and having them be a really impactful writer, having this multidisciplinary artist really show what she was capable of. Patti Smith, continued to love her writing. I find it really accessible for people that want to read something a little bit more dense, but still find a lot of brevity in it. This novel would make me kind of moved to New York City. I was working like crazy, trying to figure out where I wanted to go. I was between Los Angeles. I'd spent a summer in Los Angeles. I bought a car because I thought I was going to move there. A car that I still have. It's not that old. New York City was always my dream as a kid, but I took this time away from it, and it just reinstated how deeply I needed to be in this place. So thank you, Patty. So I've moved to New York City. I'm in the big bad city. I'm in the big bad apple. I'm chomping it. I'm loving it. I'm absolutely hitting the ground running. Years of my life that just blurred right past me. For someone who came from a small town and who was able to acclimate into this fast pace, I give myself the biggest round of applause. I killed it. I was working like crazy as well, and I didn't really read a lot. Didn't make it a priority. I was so busy trying to plant my feet in to this concrete that was already settled. And I needed to find that concrete that was getting poured down so I could stick my feet in. I was kind of writing my own stories, right? Should be like a little tattoo. Writing my own stories. There was a time that I started to kind of slow down. I met Oleg, and everything started to slowly fall into place. I started to read again. I started to have this deep pull to pick up more novels. At this point in my life, I was very like anti-literary fiction. I'm not sure why. In my warped psyche, I was like, that doesn't count as a novel. That's not a classic. It's not somebody who's, been studied and revered for years. So how can they know what they're writing about? I don't know what I was on, because I definitely have no pedestal to be talking from. But I remember kind of slowly learning to embrace these newer authors and these newer works. At that time, I picked up The Argonauts by Maggie Nelson. This isn't a favorite book of mine by any means, but holy shit, I remember exactly where I was when I was reading certain passages of that. And the writing in that is just unbelievable. Whoa, Maggie can write. It's experimental, it's coarse, it's abrasive, it's kind of almost laughable in certain situations, but ultimately it's fantastic explorative writing. It was really different than a lot of what I've been reading, even though I was going through that incredibly experimental phase with reading, and a lot of these books are kind of in that similar vein. It was just something that really took me to a place that I hadn't really felt in a long time. This was the book that kind of set it back into motion. So now, oh, you guessed it. Well, maybe you didn't guess it. Now we're going to get into me now. And if somebody was to stop me in the middle of the road, put a microphone into my face, and put me on like a TikTok saying, what's your favorite book of all time? What book would you give to anybody? I could confidently group these next group of books together and say that these are suggestions and these are the books that are defining me now. I'm just gonna list off a couple. What I talk about when I talk about running by Haruki Murakami. I've talked about this book before. Some people might think that it's a little bit cheesy, but I listen to this once a year. I have it on audiobook. I listen to it once a year. I love it. It encourages me. Every time I watch the New York City Marathon, I think about it. I just recently watched it. I cried my eyes out. Yeah, cried my eyes out like a little baby. And every year I tell myself, next year I'm gonna run it. I think this is incredibly motivational. When I'm down, I like to listen to this. I know that people have a lot of differing opinions about Murakami, which is totally fine. I respect that. To me, this is a perfect book that just teaches you the power of what reading can do. It's just a mental clarity for me, and it helps me. It's a reference point that I go back to all the time, and I love this book. I would say that this absolutely defines my 20s, where I am right now, what I need to kind of hear. East of Eden by John Steinbeck. I know exactly where I was when I read this. I was in California. There was a lot of different things going on in February of 2022, and this book helped get through a lot, and I think it's an absolutely perfect piece of American literature, which is definitely what I've been exploring a lot. I've been really, really into American literature. I am American. I think just taking multiple cross-country road trips over the span of a couple of years have propelled me to want to investigate that further, and this is a perfect novel, in my opinion. Last book, I guess, that I would say like a most recent favorite of mine, and a book that I think about at least once a week. It's by an incredibly brilliant author and somebody who I would almost consider a role model at this point, and that is White Teeth by Zadie Smith. Absolutely impossible for me to wrap my head around how mature and brilliant she was at such a young age to write this novel. These full characters, these absolutely almost like heinously perfected backstories. She's so young. I have nothing bad to say about that, and I think it'll go down as an all-time new favorite for me. Definitely a defining book for this portion of my life. Yeah, I'm proud of my choices. I definitely would say that these are the books that I think about when I think about certain parts of my life. These are the different versions of me. I'm happy with who I am, who I've become. And let's see, next year, what else is going to be added onto the list? In the next couple of years, what are the books going to be? Who knows? This is a little bit more tame. This was a little bit more, I don't know, real, I guess. I hope you enjoyed it, and let me know the timeline of your life. I'd love to hear it. I'd love to see what defined you, where you were how you were. You're wonderful, you're fabulous. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you so much to Skillshare. I will see you in the next one. My foot's asleep. Oh my God. That is also something that has never changed in me. My feet are always going to sleep. Ugh.